I've been wanting to film this video ever since I heard of this idea. So have you heard of the idea of matrescence? I first heard about it, I want to say a few years ago, and I really kind of went down, I'm going to get ready while we're chatting about this. I really went down a rabbit hole, and I'm so glad that I did, because this may be, the idea of what this is, may be the one thing that helped me fully lean in to being happy about being a parent. And I know that sounds really dark. I'm going to explain my story more than, even if you've been around a while on my channel, more than what I've shared before. But it's all in hopes to help you if you are watching this video, and whether you're not a parent yet or you recently became a parent, maybe you've been a parent for a long time. This is going to kind of give words and a term for a lot of the things that we all went through or will go through. And it has been weirdly comforting to hear all of this. So I took the time, I typed out a legitimate script. I did some serious research. I've got citations below. It really tickled my missing school itch. I love school. Anyway, for me, having a baby was one of the it was the most disorienting thing I've ever done. More so than going through puberty, more so than moving away for college, more so than my first job. Like, there is nothing more disorienting than having a child. Whether you carry it yourself, whether you adopted it, any version of it, having a baby or having a child is disorienting. I think for me, part of it was that I had already created an independent life. Like, I was married, but together we had created this life together as adults, and we had gotten used to the way that we lived our lives. We were used to doing what we wanted. We never had to question how or why we do something. It was just the way we did it. And I never needed to question whether I wanted to work or stay at home and why that might matter. All of these things that I think just kind of took for granted. So fast forward to having a baby. So if this is your first video of mine you're watching, hey, hello, I'm Jessica. I had my first baby, who is now 6, when I was 29. I'm 35 now. My second baby is 2. And obviously, when you look at it in black and white, obviously when you have a child, your life is going to look different. I knew that, you know what I mean? But I think what happened was I had her, and I thought that I could go on living the way I was, maybe with a few interruptions, but I didn't want to let go of the independence that I had found as an adult. I didn't want to let it go. And I I hadn't really thought through it this much. Like, I just knew things would change. But we were adamant about things not changing too much. And I think we can get in the weeds here before we even start. I basically wanted to stay who I was before I had the baby. And I don't just mean, like, obviously there's things that naturally just change. But I felt like we could keep doing exactly what we were doing, how we were doing it, doing things, traveling. And a lot of that we did hold on to, and I'm glad we did. We travel with our kids a lot. And that is something I am glad we did. But there were other things that we would try to force and make happen when it was like a square peg in a circle hole. You know what I mean? But for me, I was battling this independence versus basically being a mom without even really realizing that I was battling it. So I recently had this dream, and I promise we'll get to what matrescence is. I had this dream recently where I saw myself, and I had a very emotional reaction to this dream for quite a few days. In the dream, I was myself today, but I saw myself as like a 2-year-old. And I was like across the room, and I indicated for myself at 2 to come over to me. And my 2-year-old face was dirty, so I'm cleaning it up. And then I'm like cuddling myself as a 2-year-old. And there's a lot you can take away from that. I mean, my goodness, you could have a field day with, thinking through what that dream means. But one of the things I really gleaned from it was I feel like I've finally grown from feeling like a kid, even in my 30s. I know. But I know a lot of you guys know what I mean. To realizing that I really am a fully formed adult. And not only that, but I'm a mom. And there was something so beautiful about it, because I've definitely felt like in the past few years, I've kind of melted into being a true mom, and I am so happy about it. And it's just very different than I felt the first few years. So enter the idea of matrescence. So originally it was coined, this term, by an anthropologist named Dana Raphael. They said it is the process of becoming a mother, a developmental passage where a woman transitions through preconception, pregnancy and birth, surrogacy or adoption, to the postnatal period and beyond. So there really, especially at this time, had not been a lot of studies done on the mother's changes other than the obvious, like, okay, yeah, you have hormones and you give birth and all of that. It wasn't until recently that this has really been picked up and people have actually started to study the process of becoming a mother on a mother's brain and beyond. And I feel like a lot of this could also apply to the father. So not every single part of what I'm talking about only applies to the mom. I think it could apply to the other parent as well. And you'll kind of see what I mean as we go through this, because I think a big piece of it is not just in your body, but some of it literally is your environment that has changed, and that would apply to the parent, the other parent as well. But for me, and the way I view this idea, I feel like it's the process of becoming maternal and the acceptance of that. And that is what has kind of helped me get to the point that I'm at now. And some people in some articles I read were comparing it to adolescence, where, you know, that's this huge transition you take from becoming, you know, a dependent kid to being more independent. It's a radical change, right? And with matrescence, you're also undergoing a huge transformation. You're going from the independence that you found, right, after puberty, to having to take care of a dependent. So it's like this other branch that you're, you know, traveling down. And one interesting thing I learned as I've looked into this is that there have actually been studies done of the neuroplasticity in your brain, and there are actual physical changes that do happen to the brain. And a lot of them actually, because you're faced with so many more challenges as a parent, your brain has to adapt. It actually makes it so that your brain is much healthier later in life. And I find that absolutely fascinating, that having children can actually change the makeup of your brain for well beyond just that time where the kids are young, right? Or when you first have the kid. Anna Russell, she wrote an article for The New Yorker that was really well written. And it was actually about this author named Lucy Jones, who wrote a book called Matrescence. It is on my to read list. If you are a new parent especially, but even if you're not, or you're highly interested in this topic, I think you would probably love it. Reading the reviews, I'm like, okay, I'm definitely reading this book soon. But the one that wrote the article that was interviewing this author was just saying that she found the idea that there was a scientific basis for how I was feeling very comforting. And I think that's it. It is really comforting to know that, like, okay, this is actually a real process that happens. So to kind of tell a little more of my story before we delve into the meat of this topic, I feel like when I first had my first baby, I did end up having postpartum depression, but I actually was not diagnosed with it until like 18 months postpartum. I mean, really, that's pretty late. And I definitely had been dealing with a lot of these emotions prior to that. But before I actually realized okay, maybe this isn't normal, blah, blah, blah. I definitely believe that my lack of acceptance of my new role as a mother was intertwined with that postpartum depression. There were other things definitely that contributed to it, for sure. When I got diagnosed, the pandemic had just happened. And not only that, but she had a short NICU stay. A lot of things went not according to plan during the birth. A lot of things that are kind of telltale indicators that you may end up having postpartum depression. Breastfeeding didn't work. Anyway, point is, I really feel like this lack of acceptance of my new identity as a mom was connected as well to my postpartum depression. And what I mean by that is I feel like looking back at the first year or two, I feel like I wasn't as maternal as I am now. And perhaps that's part of just having a second kid. I don't know. I'll never know. But I definitely, looking back, feel like when I'll see other friends of mine that have recently become parents, they seem to me, and maybe it's just an outsider's perspective, they seem to me to be so much more attuned to their kids' needs and maternal and loving. And it's not that, oh my gosh, I loved my baby, love my child so much that it hurts. But it just feels like it felt different then. And maybe it's just that was the process of going through and becoming a mother. That is matrescence. But I feel like for different people, it takes longer, or it occurs at different times. For some people, I feel like it occurred when they first got pregnant or even beforehand. One of my friends, I feel like, has always been so maternal, always knew she wanted babies. When she had her first baby, it felt like nothing had changed. She felt like the same maternal, sweet, loving person. And that's not how it felt for me. So this article I mentioned earlier from The New Yorker, I feel like really there were a couple ideas in it that I can't stop thinking about. So one of them, I'm just gonna read the entire paragraph because I feel like it says it better. I could paraphrase, but they word it perfectly. The article said, in order to succeed in a workplace dominated by men, women have had to downplay the radical changes that do come with motherhood. Jones, so this is the author of that book, grew up reading profiles of successful women who also had families. Quote, somehow these two identities were kept separate. These women never had dried cereal or snot trails on their suits, she writes. When she entered Matrescence, she found a distinct biological as well as sociological reality to contend with, one that took me by surprise. One thing I know a lot of us feel is that guilt, whether you are a stay-at-home mom or a working mom or some kind of hybrid. That guilt, I don't think goes away. I think it just transforms, morphs, and you grow around it. But when I was fully staying at home early on, that was the hardest for me mentally. When I started to work, I felt the burden. I could see light at the end of the tunnel. And I quickly realized for me, I have to have that creative outlet. And for me, my job was YouTube. So for the longest time, I battled like, well, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. I feel like that battle of, feeling guilty if you stay at home all the time, but needing to get stuff done and feeling like, you need to do something for yourself or have some me time. And then feeling guilty that you work full time and that you have someone else taking care of your kids. Or even like for me, I do a hybrid. And I have help, like one of mine's in kindergarten now, but I have help with the other one a couple days a week. I still feel guilty about that, even though I am part of our family's income that we need to have a home and food, but I still feel guilty. And part of it is this next reason here. So another quote, an idea from the article I can't stop thinking about is, a woman's maternal identity is founded in her mother's style, which in turn was influenced by how she was raised. Whether a woman parents her child as her mother raised her or adopts a different style, becoming a mother provides an opportunity for a do-over. In a way, a woman gets to re-experience her own childhood in the act of parenting, repeating what was good and trying to improve what was not. If a woman had a difficult relationship with her mother, she may try to be the mother she wishes she'd had. Now, I had a wonderful mother, a wonderful childhood, but there's always those things that you look at and think, oh, I wonder how I could do that differently, or I wonder, whatever. And then you add in, if there's another parent in the picture, their own childhood and what they grew up with and how they would want to parent, and you kind of find your way in that way. But I definitely feel like because my mom was a stay-at-home mom until we were all in school and I was one of 6 kids, and I also have a family that a lot of my siblings are very traditional and have many, many kids, and most of them stayed at home, many of them homeschooled. I come from a family like that. And so for me to actually be working and be part of the income for our family in my extended family is incredibly abnormal. I shouldn't say incredibly, but I mean, it is a little bit more abnormal. And so I feel like I was almost hardwired to be a stay-at-home mom. Anyone that's a stay-at-home mom knows that is harder than working. I don't care what anyone says. I mean, I guess it would depend on your job, but being a stay-at-home mom full-time is one of the hardest things you could ever do. I talk to my sister about it all the time. My mom will tell you the same thing. My point being, that is not what I wanted in my life before kids. I had created this YouTube world and I wanted to be able to keep doing it, and I wanted to be able to do it seriously. And to be able to do that with a kid, that meant I had to make some decisions. I had to make decisions about, what do I want that to look like? What do I want to do with my kid? How many days a week would I need? How many hours a day, whatever. And with that came that guilt, because I knew the way I was raised, my mom was with us all day. And it's almost like internally in my cells, it felt wrong. It felt wrong to work. There's still days where I'm like, this feels wrong, but I also know that the times where I have tried to do it full time, I couldn't do it. I'm gonna be honest, I couldn't do it. So hats off to those that do it full time. You have the hardest job in the world. You do. And you are a boss, seriously. So that mental battle, I think, can also be a part of this process of becoming a mother and kind of melting into being happy in your motherhood, is you have to live with that constant battle. That mom guilt, no matter what you do, you feel it. Like, I remember thinking, okay, the kids need some social interaction with other kids, but then when they would, if they were without me, I would feel guilty, even though I knew that social interaction was good for them. Another beautiful part, I think, about matrescence, because I feel like a lot of this is coming off negative, but we're getting to the point where, like, for me, I found the beauty and happiness in motherhood that I struggled to find early on. And so one idea that I loved is motherhood becomes a site of creativity and innovation. When Jones's daughter turns 3, she finds herself inspired by her child's lack of self-consciousness. I wanted what she had, she writes. She starts painting and playing music again. She writes experimental short stories. She answers questions on space and time, rocks and minerals, evolution and death. The house filled with pencils and paints and stickers and impressions and pom-poms and clay and chalk, Jones writes. One beautiful thing for me that has come from parenthood, especially as they have gotten older, is exactly that. I'm suddenly finding parts of myself, that'll make me emotional too, but I'm finding parts of myself that I kind of felt were like lost forever. Creativity and art, music, nature, like so much that you watch a young child play and you think, gosh, like if you could just bottle that up, you know what I mean? And it's so beautiful. I think sometimes the dregs of motherhood with young babies is so hard, especially if it's your first or only kid. You feel like you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. You feel like they're going to be a baby forever. And they're not. You are going to blink. It won't feel like it, but you're going to blink and they'll be 3, 4, 5, 6. And you see this beautiful arc of childhood that you remember and just that unabashed wonder that they have. You know, I'll watch my oldest just go around the backyard pretending to be a fairy and in her own little world. And I'm like, how incredible, how beautiful is that? So how does it differ for different people? I do think that, like I mentioned earlier, some people experience and go through this process early on and instantly just love motherhood. And some, it takes longer, like mine, and I've told my story. For example, someone else I am close with married their high school sweetheart, still married, they have 6 kids, but they started having babies right at the start of their adulthood. So I was talking to her about it recently and talking to her about this idea, and she was also fascinated by the topic. And she was saying she feels like she definitely went through this process, but that she found the joy in motherhood maybe a little earlier because, and this is, you know, her thought process, because she didn't really know an adulthood without kids. They got married young, they had kids early on, so she didn't really feel like she had these deep adult independent roots laid that she had to undo and change. So for her, this was her adulthood. So it kind of, you know, undoubtedly it was incredibly hard. I mean, she didn't downplay that, and that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is she felt like her process into accepting and loving motherhood came quicker because of that. And she also did mention having her second kid definitely solidified it. And that's kind of what I've found too. Not that you have to have a second kid to enjoy motherhood. Not at all what I'm saying. Please do not get my words twisted. But I do feel like a lot of change in my mental state came with having my second kid. I don't know. I can't explain it. And I often wonder if I had heard of this transitional process of matrescence earlier on, if I almost would have, just having a name for this and knowing a little bit more about it, I almost wonder if it would have been easier for me early on. I don't mean that I wouldn't have had postpartum depression, I wouldn't have struggled. I mean, come on. But you know what I mean? Sometimes having a name for something can really empower you. And I don't know why. You know, you can look into research on it and learn more about it. And for my husband and I, you know, we were very unsure about having kids. We knew we eventually hoped for children, but the timing of it was constantly a big question mark for us. And like I said, we lived a good chunk of our adulthood without kids. So that change felt extreme. It felt extreme. If you're enjoying this video, by the way, please give it a thumbs up. Comment below with your experience because I'm so curious to hear your stories, and I think some of your stories could help someone else digging around the comments. It also helps me out. It helps this video find other people that may benefit from hearing about this. So thank you ahead of time. I feel like my eyeliner looks uneven. So another piece of an article I really resonated with was the British psychotherapist Rosika Parker wrote in Torn in Two, The Experience of Maternal Ambivalence, about the pull and push of wanting a child close, but also craving space physically and emotionally as the normal wave of motherhood. Ambivalence, so this idea of ambivalence, is a feeling that comes up in the roles and relationships a person is most invested in because they're always a juggling act between giving and taking. Motherhood is no exception. Part of why people have a hard time dealing with ambivalence is that it's uncomfortable to feel two opposing things at the same time. So again, going back to that parent guilt, that's exactly it. You want your children close at all times, but you also know you need some space. So for example, a stay-at-home parent, they want to be around their children all the time, but they also can recognize those times in the day or the week where they're like, okay, I need a walk outside. I need a nap today. I need a moment alone while the kids are napping or while the other parent helps, whatever it is. You recognize those times. But even when you take that time for yourself, let's say you do go take a walk alone, undoubtedly you will feel that wave of guilt, like, oh, I should be with them, like, or I should have brought them on this walk. You can't help it, right? Same for someone that works, whether it's full-time or not. Here I am working and I'll think of my kid and think, oh, like, I wonder what they're doing. Like, oh, I really miss them. Like, can't wait to get home to them. I wish it, right? But that tug of both feelings is something that you almost just have to grow okay with. You have to grow okay with it. That, I feel like that phrasing is weird, but it's kind of perfect for this because, and there was a part of me that didn't want to film this video at all, if I'm being honest, because I know how anything I say in a public space like the internet can be twisted and changed to mean something I absolutely don't mean. You know what I mean? And this quote resonated with me. Too many women are ashamed to speak openly about their complicated experience for fear of being judged. This type of social isolation may even trigger postpartum depression. I really feel that. When people around you in your sphere are, seemingly like, let's say you just gave birth and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this is so hard. You're sleep deprived, you're covered in spit up, maybe nursing's not working the way you thought, or there was a NICU stay. It's different than what you thought, and it always will be. And you meet up with someone that had a baby, maybe a little less recently than you, and they're just, nursing's working great. Or, obviously that was an issue for me, so it's top of mind. Or they are talking about how well their baby's sleeping or whatever. And so you don't feel comfortable talking about how you're feeling. That person that's talking about how well things are going definitely has their own stuff, but they're not comfortable talking about it. So then you're in this weird loop that we all get into where you can't really complain about what's really going on. The other person probably would like to complain too, but they can't. So around and around we go. No one's really talking about how they actually feel. And I feel like we should be, right? We should be. Another thing I think that can't be understated is the idea that we all have created in our minds of a fantasy mom. No one is a fantasy mom. It's the mom that somehow is a stay-at-home mom and works and somehow juggles both perfectly. And they take time for themselves, but they're also always with the kids and they're always doing creative, cute things with them. They homeschool and send their kids to school. Like it doesn't exist. And I think we all have to be okay with being the good enough mom. And that sounds so negative, but that is all that exists. That's the only kind of mom that exists, is a good enough mom. It doesn't matter how well you are doing. There will always be something that you think to yourself, oh, I should be better about this. Like maybe I plan all of these things and do all this stuff with my kid, but I'm not doing XYZ food-wise. I don't know. These are weird examples. My point being, the only kind of parent that exists is a good enough parent. You're doing your best with what the tools you've been given, with the time you have, with the situation you're in. That is all that exists. And anything you see to the contrary or that you think is to the contrary is probably just made up. Internet, come on. No one is showing, some people are showing the real deal. I feel like in more recent times, a lot of people are showing real raw, like what it's actually like. And I love that. But you know what I mean? There's plenty that are not. And you're only seeing the highlight reel. Even for me, like I don't really show my kids anymore, but you're still only seeing a highlight reel. Like I'm not going to pick up the camera when a kid is throwing a tantrum or whatever. Why would I, right? So some things that for me and my experience with this is what matrescence has looked like for me. It's made me question what I believe, what my values are. It has made me question who I even am anymore. It's made me question what I even like what are my hobbies? If I had free time, what do I even do with it? You know, it's made me wonder for the future, like, what would I do when my kids are out of the house? Like, who will I even be? I was just on a walk with a friend this morning and we were talking about exactly this. It also has made me wonder, how are we going to survive this stage? Because this is also really, really hard. The young kid, toddler stage. And of course, it's also made me feel guilty for all the reasons we've talked about. So Chelsea Robinson's this clinical social worker, and she said that clients in the first 5 years of parenthood, 5 years, okay, that's a long time. Clients in the first 5 years of parenthood often face major life transitions like returning to work, deciding whether or not to have another child. They feel burnout from doing it all and might be experiencing mom guilt, or I would say even parent guilt, and general overwhelm, or they could be looking to find fulfillment in identities outside of being a mom. So there's so many things going on in our minds within that first 5 years of having a kid. And I feel like you have another kid, clock starts over, like, and so you're constantly battling all of these different things. Like, you want to have your own identity, but you also want to be a really great parent. You also want to try to do things that are healthy for yourself. You also want to create memories for your family as a whole. You also want to maybe work or maybe not. You also want to learn how to make sourdough bread. You also, you know, all of these things are on top of just raising a kid. And on top of that, now we have social media telling us all of these perfect ways to do X, Y, Z. And so you feel like you're never, ever, ever measuring up to what you're supposed to be doing. When in reality, whatever you're doing is fine. It's what we're all doing. You know what I mean? So for me, I wanted to make this video because I feel like normalizing this process of becoming a mother, accepting motherhood, finding the joy in motherhood is something that's not talked about a lot. And I feel like it's starting to be, like, it was easier to find articles now than when I first learned about it, which is really exciting. And I feel like this whole process can be really ugly. And like I said earlier, disorienting. It can be downright stressful and hard and tearful and emotional and ugly. Like, it's hard. But I feel like on the other end of it, you do come out, like I said, finding that joy and actually enjoying this process, even the ugly moments. And it's not to say everything's beautiful, flowers, happy-go-lucky. I mean, I have a 2-year-old at home, but you almost view it in a different light. And I think that is so beautiful. And it kind of makes the hard parts of the process worth it. So if you're really into this subject, there's so much more you can learn. There's some really scientific articles. I'll link everything I use to kind of formulate my thoughts on this and to form my little script for this video. I'll have all of those down below. I'll have that link for the book that I mentioned as well that's on my to-read list. Did I finish getting ready? I need some powder. I was just realizing, I'm like, I don't know if I ever finished getting ready here. If you are into this style of video, I have done a couple of videos like this before. I call this my Getting Real series. Where I do a deep dive into these kinds of topics. So I'll link my other 2 below. I've done one about trends and another about perfectionism. I loved that video. So definitely give those a watch if you're into this. And if you are new to my channel, I hope you'll subscribe and stick around. I do videos like this. I do vlogs a lot, showing my life behind the scenes and just kind of going through life with you guys. We do a lot of chatty, get ready with me videos too. So I'd love to have you join the fam by subscribing, and come say hey to me on my Instagram. It's Jessica Braun, B-R-A-U-N. Over there, I'm on my stories almost every single day, catching up with you guys. So I love you, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.